Hi, I'm Emily. Thanks for being here with me today. I'm just a woman who thought she had it all together. Family I'd do anything for. A job I poured my heart into. But sometimes the ones you love most are the ones who hurt you deepest. I thought my sister had my back. Until the day she stabbed it. What happened next? It broke me, then rebuilt me. If you've ever been betrayed by the ones you love most, stay with me. This story might feel all too familiar. It's funny the things you remember. The squeak of a chair, the way the fluorescent light hummed overhead, the smell of stale coffee and something else. Something like triumph but not mine. That day it was the sterile, too bright conference room, a place I usually associated with tedious meetings, not this. My own sister Sarah stood there. And Matt Sullivan, my best friend since college, the guy who'd crashed on my couch for 3 months when he was starting out. And my uncle Richard Harper, the CEO, the man who was supposed to be family. They were a united front, a panel of judges, and I was the one on trial. Sarah, she had this little smirk playing on her lips. Just a flicker, but it was there. It was the kind of expression that said, "Gotcha." It twisted something cold and sharp in my gut. Matt wouldn't look at me. He stared at a point just past my left shoulder, his jaw tight. He looked uncomfortable, ashamed even, but not enough to speak up. And Richard, my Uncle Richard, he just looked detached. Like he was discussing quarterly earnings, not tearing my career, my life apart. "Emily," Richard began, his voice devoid of any warmth, any familial connection. Just flat, corporate authority. "We've reviewed the situation. And well, the company has decided to terminate your employment. Effective immediately." The words hung there. Terminate my employment. Fired. Just like that. After 15 years of pouring my heart and soul into that place, often being the one behind the scenes, the IT specialist who kept their critical systems humming while others took the bows. My green eyes, usually warm, probably looked like chips of ice. I always kept my dark blonde hair tied back in a practical ponytail, dressed simply in blouses and slacks. I was about competence, not flashiness. Maybe that was my mistake. "Your ID badge, please," Sarah said, her voice a little too eager. She held out her hand, palm up. Her nails were perfectly manicured. A shade of red I'd never seen her wear before. It felt like such a public spectacle. Even though it was just the 4 of us in that room. But their united stance, their cold efficiency, it was a performance. For whom I wasn't sure. Maybe just for themselves, to solidify their power. I remember thinking about my mom then. She'd always preached family unity. "Family is your backbone, Emily, always," she'd say. Her words, once a comfort, now felt like a cruel joke. This was my family, and they were breaking my back. It was Sarah I'd stuck my neck out for just 2 years ago. She'd been struggling, bouncing between jobs. I'd gone to Richard, pleaded her case, vouched for her. I'd mentored her, spent my own time after hours helping her get up to speed, navigating the internal politics. I'd even quietly covered for a few of her early mistakes, wanting her to succeed, to feel secure. And this was how she repaid me. That smirk, it cut like a blade. I slowly unclipped my ID badge. My photo stared up at me, a younger, more trusting version of myself. I placed it in Sarah's outstretched hand. Her fingers brushed mine, cool and quick. "We'll have security escort you out," Richard added, as if I might cause a scene. As if I might stoop to their level. I just nodded. What was there to say? The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, it left me breathless. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd crushed the quiet, unassuming IT specialist who just fixed things. They saw me, in my simple blouse and slacks, my hair pulled back, and they underestimated me. They always had. They thought they'd crushed me. I murmured to myself as I walked out of that building for the last time, the indifferent city sounds of Portland, Oregon washing over me. The weight of their betrayal was heavy, a physical ache in my chest. But beneath the humiliation, beneath the searing pain, something else was stirring. A cold, hard resolve. They didn't know I owned their world. I clutched the keys to my used Honda, my mind already racing. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The sting of their actions was fresh, but so was the dawning realization that this was just the beginning of a different kind of battle. The seeds of that confrontation, of course, had been sown months earlier. It's funny how you can be in the middle of something, see all the little pieces, but not quite put the puzzle together until it smacks you in the face. 6 months before that awful day in the conference room, I was just Emily Harper, senior IT specialist. Good old Emily. The one they called when a server crashed at 2 in the morning. The one who could untangle the most complex network issues. The one who understood the digital guts of Harper Innovations better than anyone, probably even Richard. But understanding the guts didn't get you a seat at the main table. I'd sit in those big meetings, the ones where strategy was discussed and futures were planned, and I'd be invisible. A necessary cog maybe, but not a voice. I'd offer solutions, technical insights that could save them millions or open up new revenue streams, and they'd nod, maybe a polite "thanks, Emily," and then the conversation would just flow right over me, back to the louder, more connected voices. It was frustrating, sure, but I'd learned early in my career to keep my head down and do the work. My first real job, when I was 27, I developed a software prototype, something I was incredibly proud of. My mentor, someone I trusted, took it, slapped his name on it, and got the promotion. That left a mark, a deep-seated wariness about workplace alliances. So, I focused on competence, on being indispensable in my own quiet way. Sarah's arrival at the company had been a mixed blessing. I loved my sister, I truly did. Or at least, I loved the idea of her, the sister I thought I knew. When she joined, I hoped we'd be allies, a little family unit within the bigger corporate structure. For a while it was like that. But then she started getting friendly with Richard's son, a junior marketing guy with more ambition than sense. Suddenly, Sarah was in different circles. She started dressing differently, talking differently. More corporate. More like them. Slowly, I found myself excluded from projects I should have been on. Emails would go unreturned. My input, once at least politely acknowledged, was now actively ignored. Sarah, when I'd ask her about it, would just shrug. "Oh, it's probably an oversight, Em. Don't worry about it." But her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. I saw her at lunch with some of the executives Richard favored, laughing a little too loudly. It was a subtle shift, like the air pressure changing before a storm. You feel it even if you can't quite name it. Now here's the part they didn't know. The part no one knew. About 5 years before all this, after that early betrayal with my software prototype, I'd started a side hustle. Cybersecurity consulting. I was good at it, really good. And I was discreet. I'd built up a solid roster of clients, made good money, far more than my salary at Harper Innovations. And I'd been smart with it. I didn't buy a fancy car or a bigger apartment. My cozy place with its small balcony, my reliable Honda. That was enough for me. Instead, I'd started a shell company, a completely anonymous, legally sound entity. And through that company, I began to buy shares in Harper Innovations. Small amounts at first, then larger as my cybersecurity work flourished. It was a long game, a quiet accumulation of power. My mother's words about family being a backbone, well, I guess I was trying to build my own, a financial one, just in case the emotional one ever crumbled. I never imagined it would be Sarah who'd bring the hammer down. The complaint that led to my firing, the one Richard cited with such grave authority? It was a work of fiction orchestrated by Sarah. She claimed I was negligent, that I'd compromised system security on a key project. A project, ironically, that I'd been systematically shut out of. She'd even gotten an ally in HR, someone she'd cultivated, to back her up, to make it look legitimate. It was a neat little package, designed to oust me quickly and quietly. Looking back, I could see the pieces falling into place. Their whispers, the closed-door meetings I wasn't invited to. Matt's increasing distance. He'd always been my sounding board. But in those last few months, he'd become evasive. Jastibus, em etc. Busy aligning himself with the new power structure, apparently. The thing is, I wasn't entirely blindsided. I'd felt the shift. I'd seen the knives being sharpened. My early years, that mentor incident, had taught me to be observant, to protect myself. I could have fought back earlier, exposed Sarah's machinations before they reached critical mass. But a part of me, a weary, cynical part, wanted to see. I wanted to see how far they would go. I wanted to see who would stand by me, and who would betray me. And Sarah didn't just betray me. She led the charge. She stood there with that smirk, holding out her hand for my badge. And in that moment, whatever illusions I had left about her, about our bond, they just shattered. I let them think they had one. I let them escort me out. I remained silent, my face a mask of what they probably interpreted as shock and defeat. But inside, the architect was already drawing up new plans. My calculated silence had given me the one thing I needed most: clarity, and the unshakable knowledge of who my enemies truly were. 2 days. That's all it took. 2 days of them thinking they'd gotten rid of me, the quiet IT specialist who was supposedly a threat to their grand designs. 2 days for Sarah to probably redecorate my old office, for Matt to practice his new, more important sounding title, for Richard to congratulate himself on decisive leadership. I spent those 2 days not in mourning, but in motion. My cozy apartment, usually a haven of peace with its little balcony overflowing with herbs, became a war room. My used Honda, usually just for commuting, ferried me to quiet meetings with my legal team. While Sarah was likely celebrating, I pictured her in my mind's eye, perhaps flaunting a new designer dress I'd seen her coveting online, toasting her quick ascent with champagne. She'd always had a taste for the finer things she felt entitled to. I, on the other hand, was dressed in one of my usual simple blouses and slacks, going over documents line by painstaking line. There was a certain satisfaction in the contrast, in knowing that their victory party was built on a foundation of lies, a foundation I was about to demolish. The call for the emergency board meeting went out under the name of the shell company, the one that had been steadily, silently acquiring shares in Harper Innovations for the past 5 years. It was a name none of them would recognize. The agenda was vague: urgent review of corporate governance and leadership. I imagined the flurry of confused calls, the nervous speculation. The morning of the meeting, I walked back into that building. Not through the main entrance this time. Not as Emily Harper, terminated employee. I was escorted to the executive boardroom by my lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Albright, who had a smile that could freeze fire. The air in the room was thick with tension when we entered. Richard was at the head of the table, looking imperious. Sarah was next to him, a little too bright, a little too confident, though I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes when she saw me. Matt was there too, looking pale, fidgeting with a pen. The other board members, a mix of old-timers and newer appointees, looked bewildered. "Emily," Richard said, his voice a low growl. "What is the meaning of this? You are no longer an employee here." "Security." Ms. Albright stepped forward, placing a meticulously organized binder on the polished mahogany table. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice calm and cutting, "my client is not here today as Emily Harper, former IT specialist. She is here as the majority shareholder of Harper Innovations, representing the ownership interest of a holding company that, as of yesterday, controls 53% of this firm." Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. I watched their faces. Richard's jaw literally dropped. His eyes, usually so calculating, were wide with disbelief. "Sarah." Oh, Sarah's confident smirk dissolved. Her face went white, then flushed a blotchy red. Her perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth. Matt just stared, his face a mask of dawning horror. He finally made eye contact with me, and what I saw there was pure, unadulterated panic. I let the silence stretch for a moment, letting the reality sink in. My piercing green eyes, which they'd so often overlooked, met each of theirs in turn. "Yes, Uncle Richard." I said, my voice even betraying none of the turmoil, the years of quiet endurance, the fresh sting of their betrayal. It seems there have been some developments. Ms. Albright then began in a cool, methodical tone to lay it all out. The ownership documents, irrefutable and legally binding. Then the evidence of their misconduct. My misconduct, they'd called it. She presented emails, Sarah's emails, to her HR contact, carefully outlining the fabricated complaints against me. She presented falsified reports, signed off by Matt, that conveniently supported Sarah's claims and made her look like a hero for uncovering my supposed negligence. She even had logs showing unauthorized access to project files, time just before Sarah discovered the security breaches she'd pinned on me. It was a comprehensive, damning portrait of deceit and conspiracy. The actions taken against Ms. Harper 2 days ago, Ms. Albright continued, were not only unjust but were based on a coordinated effort to remove her and misappropriate her work, presumably to cover up incompetence and further certain careers. She paused, letting her gaze rest on Sarah, then Matt, then Richard. These actions constitute gross misconduct and a breach of fiduciary duty, particularly on the part of Mr. Richard Harper as CEO. I watched them. Sarah was actually trembling. Matt looked like he was going to be sick. Richard, to his credit, tried to bluster. This is outrageous. Preposterous. These are fabrications. Are they, Uncle? I asked softly. I slid a small stack of papers across the table. Severance letters. 3 of them. You fired me without cause, publicly humiliated me, all to protect yourselves and your ambitions. I'm merely rebalancing the scales. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of years of being undervalued, of that core belief in family being shattered. Your positions with Harper Innovations are terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in that room. Sarah stared at her letter as if it were a venomous snake. Matt just slumped in his chair. Richard looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The other board members, after a moment of stunned silence, began to murmur, their expressions shifting from confusion to a dawning understanding, and in some cases a grim sort of respect. Leaving that boardroom with Ms. Albright by my side was different than leaving 2 days prior. There was no humiliation this time, just a quiet, almost solemn sense of justice. It wasn't a joyous victory, not really. There was a profound sadness woven through it, the sadness of what my family, my supposed best friend, had become. But as I stepped out into the Portland afternoon, the air felt cleaner, lighter. I had taken back my power, not with shouting or drama, but with quiet preparation and undeniable truth. The architect had executed her plans. You'd think that would be the end of it, wouldn't you? The dramatic boardroom showdown, the villains vanquished, the quiet hero taking her rightful place. Oh man, if only life were that neat. The days following the board meeting were unsettling. I won, yes. I was now in charge of the company I'd secretly poured my resources and my strategic mind into. But peace, that feeling I craved, it felt like a stranger I kept missing in a crowded room. It started subtly. Silent phone calls to my apartment, usually late at night. Just dead air on the other end. Then came the official-looking letters threatening legal action, claiming all sorts of ridiculous things, patent infringement from my old cybersecurity work, defamation. They were clearly designed to intimidate, to bog me down in legal muck. My lawyers handled them easily enough. They were baseless, desperate ploys. But they were a constant hum of static in the background, a reminder that some people don't go down quietly. Then came the break-in. I came home one evening from a long day at the office, my office now, a strange and slightly surreal feeling, to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart leaped into my throat. My little place, my sanctuary, had been violated. Inside, it wasn't ransacked like in a movie. Nothing was obviously stolen. But things were moved. Drawers slightly open, papers on my desk shuffled. It was creepy, a clear message that someone could get to me, could invade my personal space. My skin crawled. That feeling of being watched, of being targeted, it's insidious. Chips away at your sense of security. I called the police, of course. And I also called my own security consultant, someone I trusted from my cybersecurity days. He found it quickly enough. No forced entry. They'd used a key. My old building had a master keycard system for maintenance, and somehow one had gone missing a while back. And who had access to the records of who had which keycard? And who knew my old routines, my old vulnerabilities? Didn't take a genius. My consultant traced the unauthorized keycard access directly back to a card that had been issued to Sarah during her brief tenure. It had supposedly been deactivated, but clearly, someone had found a loophole or an accomplice. The access log showed it was used the previous afternoon, while I was at the office. It was Sarah and Matt. I just knew it. They were getting desperate. The image of them, my sister and my former best friend, sneaking into my apartment, pawing through my things, it made me feel sick. What were they looking for? Some dirt? Some leverage? Or were they just trying to unnerve me? Probably all of the above. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine the tech world is a small one, that Sarah had tried to launch her own tech consulting firm. She'd even approached some of Harper Innovation's old clients, armed with what I suspected were stolen project files and contact lists from her little jaunt into my apartment. It failed spectacularly. Without the backing of an established company, without my technical expertise to actually deliver, her charm and stolen data weren't enough. Potential clients saw through her. Her reputation, after the news of the boardroom coup and her unceremonious firing, was mud. And Matt? He tried to find a position with our competitors. But word travels fast. No one wanted to touch someone who'd been complicit in such a blatant corporate backstabbing and data falsification. He was radioactive. Last I heard, he was doing freelance IT work, small gigs, a shadow of the ambitious executive he tried to be. I should have felt a surge of triumph, shouldn't I? Seeing them flail, seeing their schemes crumble. And there was a part of me, a small, hard part, that acknowledged the grim justice of it. But mostly I just felt tired. The victory in the boardroom had been decisive, but these echoes of their malice, their desperation, they were draining. I'd won the battle, but the war for my own peace of mind, that felt ongoing. I'd stare out from my balcony sometimes at the city lights, and a wave of loneliness would wash over me. I had the company, I had my financial security, but the cost had been high. The family my mother had cherished was fractured beyond repair. My closest friendship was a casualty. I'd won, but peace felt like a stranger. I'd sit in my quiet apartment, the silence no longer entirely comforting, and wonder if this was what revenge tasted like. It wasn't as sweet as I'd imagined. It was complicated, and I had a nagging feeling, a prickle on the back of my neck, that it wasn't quite over. I thought it was over, that they'd finally slink away. Then came the shareholder meeting, and I realized some people just don't know when to quit. The annual shareholder meeting was supposed to be my official debut, my moment to reassure investors, to lay out my vision for the future of Harper Innovations. I'd spent weeks preparing, working with my new team, a team I was carefully building, based on competence and integrity, not connections or corporate gamesmanship. The room was packed. Investors, analysts, even a few financial journalists. The air was buzzing with anticipation. I stood at the podium, my dark blonde hair neatly tied back, my simple but professional dress a deliberate choice. I wanted to project calm, steady competence. My green eyes scanned the crowd, a little nervous, yes, but also determined. I was ready for this. I started my presentation, outlining the company's recent performance, acknowledging the leadership changes, as I diplomatically put it, and then moving on to my strategic plan for growth and innovation. I spoke about restoring integrity, about fostering a culture of collaboration, about leveraging the incredible talent within the company that had, for too long, been overlooked, people like the old me. And then get this, just as I was hitting my stride, a commotion erupted at the back of the room. A familiar voice, shrill and accusatory, cut through the air. "She's a fraud. She's lying to all of you." It was Sarah, my sister, looking disheveled, wildeed, clutching a sheaf of papers. Security tried to intervene, but she pushed past them, making her way towards the stage, her voice rising hysterically. "She forged documents. She stole this company. I have proof." The room went silent. All eyes were on her, then on me. You could feel the collective intake of breath. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a nightmare. My carefully constructed image, my plans for the company, my very legacy. It all felt like it was hanging by a thread, about to be shredded by her public meltdown. This was her public gambit, a desperate, last-ditch effort to destroy me. She reached the front, waving the papers triumphantly. "These documents," she declared, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and theatrical desperation, "prove that Emily Harper manipulated financial records, that her shell company's acquisitions were illegal. She's a criminal." I looked at her, standing there, a whirlwind of accusations and fury. A part of me felt a stab of pity. She looked so broken, so consumed by whatever darkness had taken root in her. But the stronger part of me, the part that had endured and fought back, knew I couldn't let her win. Not like this. I held up a hand, signaling for quiet, for calm. My voice when I spoke was steady, much steadier than I felt inside. "Sarah," I said, my tone even, almost gentle, "you've made some very serious accusations." She thrust the papers towards me. "It's all here. The proof." I took the papers. I glanced at them. And then I allowed myself a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Actually, Sarah," I said, turning to address the stunned audience, "these documents, I've been expecting them." A confused murmur rippled through the room. "You see," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "after the events of a few weeks ago, and the subsequent break-in at my apartment, I had a feeling something like this might happen. So, I took certain precautions." I looked directly at Sarah, whose triumphant expression was beginning to falter, replaced by a dawning unease. "I knew you might try to access company files, perhaps even plant or alter information. So I created a decoy. A very specific, very well-hidden decoy file, containing deliberately flawed data. Data that would look incriminating if taken out of context. A file that only someone with unauthorized access and malicious intent would find and try to use." I held up the papers she'd given me. "And these, Sarah, are printouts from that decoy file. Thank you for confirming how you obtained your proof." The color drained from Sarah's face. She started to stammer. "No, that's not true." "Oh, but it is," I said. And then I played my trump card. "But that's not all. It seems your desperation led you to make other errors in judgment." I nodded to my head of security, who discreetly handed a small audio player to the AV technician. "Before this meeting, I was approached by an individual, someone Sarah had attempted to bribe, offering him a significant sum of money and a future position if he would publicly support her false claims against me today and create a disturbance. Fortunately for us, this individual chose integrity over collusion." And then, his voice clear and undeniable, the audio recording filled the room. Sarah's voice, cajoling then threatening, offering money. It was damning, irrefutable. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by Sarah's choked gasp. The investors, the media, they stared at her, no longer with confusion but with contempt. She had played her hand, and she had lost spectacularly and publicly. Security moved in then, no longer tentative. They gently but firmly escorted a now sobbing Sarah from the room. The applause started slowly, then built, a wave of support, of relief. I took a deep breath, the adrenaline slowly receding, leaving me a little shaky but resolute. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice thick with emotion but steady. I apologize for that interruption. As I was saying, my commitment is to restore not only the financial health of Harper Innovations but also its integrity, its heart. This company was built on solid foundations, and I intend to honor that legacy by building a future we can all be proud of. The rest of the meeting went smoothly. The questions were pointed but fair. The support was palpable. I had faced down the public assault, turned their own desperation against them. As I left the stage, I felt a sense of victory, yes, but also a profound weariness. Surely this had to be it. Surely there were no more ghosts left to fight. I thought I'd finally secured my future, the company's future. Then a letter arrived a week later, and I realized life always has one more surprise up its sleeve. The letter was innocuous enough at first glance. Standard legal envelope. A return address from a law firm I didn't recognize. I almost tossed it onto the pile of routine correspondence. But something made me pause. A little prickle of unease. I slid it open. The contents made the blood run cold from my veins. It was a formal claim, laid out in dense legalese, from a Mr. Lucas Bennett. Lucas Bennett. A name I hadn't heard, hadn't allowed myself to think about for over a decade. Lucas Bennett, my first real business partner, the co-founder of my very first venture, long before the cybersecurity consulting, long before Harper Innovations. Lucas Bennett, who was supposed to be dead. The letter claimed he was alive and well, and that he was asserting his 14% ownership stake in the original company we'd started together. A company that, through a series of transformations and careful investments on my part, had eventually become the seed capital for the shell corporation I'd used to acquire Harper Innovations. If his claim was valid, he could potentially own nearly half of everything I just fought so hard to secure. Oh man, my head spun. Lucas. It was like a ghost had materialized out of my past. I sank into my chair, the letter trembling in my hand. Memories flooded back, vivid and sharp. Me and Lucas, barely out of our 20s, crammed into a tiny rented office that always smelled faintly of old pizza and ambition. We were coders, dreamers. We had this brilliant idea for a piece of software, something revolutionary at the time. I was the meticulous one, the cautious architect of the code. Lucas was the charismatic frontman, the risk-taker, always pushing for more, faster. We were fire and ice, and for a while it worked. But his ambition started to curdle. He got involved with some shady investors, started making promises we couldn't keep, cutting corners I wasn't comfortable with. We argued constantly. The dream soured. Then came the accident. Lucas had been on a solo sailing trip, something he did to blow off steam. His boat was found capsized, no sign of him. Everyone assumed he'd drowned. There was a memorial even. I'd grieved, in my own way, for the lost friend, the shattered dream, even amidst the relief that the relentless pressure was over. I'd slowly, carefully rebuilt. I'd taken the remnants of our intellectual property, the legitimate parts, and leveraged it into my cybersecurity work. I never imagined. The letter demanded a meeting. Midnight. An old, disused warehouse down by the waterfront. Classic. If this was Lucas, he hadn't lost his flair for the dramatic. Part of me screamed not to go. Felt like a trap. But another part, the part that needed to see, to know, to finally close this chapter, knew I had to. I didn't go alone, of course. I wasn't that naive Emily from her 20s anymore. My security consultant and two of his discreet, very capable associates were with me, unseen, unheard, but there. The warehouse was vast, cold, and echoing. Moonlight slanted through broken panes of glass. And there he was, stepping out of the shadows. Lucas. Older, harder, lines etched around his eyes and mouth that hadn't been there before, but unmistakably him. That same restless energy still radiated off him. "Emily," he said, a slow, wolfish grin spreading across his face. "Long time no see. You've done well for yourself. Very well. Our little venture really paid off, didn't it? Lucas, I said, keeping my voice steady, my hands clasped in front of me to stop them from shaking. My piercing green eyes, which had seen so much betrayal already, met his. They said you were dead. He shrugged. Reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated. Let's just say I needed to disappear for a while. Things got complicated, but I kept an eye on things. On you. His gaze was predatory. 14%, Emily. That was our deal. I want my share. Half the profits from Harper Innovations. Or things could get complicated for you too. I still have all our old records, our agreements. Could get very messy, very public. He was threatening exposure, threatening to drag my carefully rebuilt life through the mud. I let him finish. I listened to the bluster, the threats. The old Emily might have crumpled or argued or tried to negotiate. But I wasn't her anymore. I'd learned from Sarah, from Matt, from Richard. I'd learned to be prepared. When he was done, I took a slow breath. It's true, Lucas, I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the cavernous space. We did have an agreement. 14%. But you conveniently forget a few details. I signaled to one of my associates, who stepped forward and handed Lucas a slim folder. You see, when you disappeared, you left a few loose ends. Debts, unpaid taxes, and that offshore account you were so proud of, the one you thought no one knew about? Lucas's grin faltered. A flicker of unease crossed his face. As the surviving partner dealing with the dissolution of our original company, I continued, I was legally obligated to settle its affairs, including its liabilities, and in doing so I acquired certain assets. Among them, the full ownership of that offshore account, the one where you'd stashed your initial seed money for your extended vacation. An account whose value, funnily enough, was almost exactly equivalent to your 14% stake, adjusted for debts. It's all in there. Legally executed. Your claim was settled years ago, Lucas. You have no stake. No leverage. He snatched the folder, rifling through the papers, his face growing paler with each page. The confidence, the swagger, it just drained out of him. He looked up, his eyes narrowed, no longer predatory, just defeated. You always were the smart one, Emily, he finally whispered, the words bitter. I just learned to protect myself, I said. There was no triumph in my voice, just a deep, profound weariness and perhaps a glimmer of something else. My associates will escort you out. I suggest you find a new life, Lucas. A legitimate one this time. He didn't say another word. He just turned and walked away, a phantom fading back into the shadows from whence he came. As I watched him go, the chill of the warehouse seemed to recede. I stood there for a long moment, the silence broken only by the distant sounds of the city. I'd lost my sister, my best friend, my uncle's respect, or what I thought was respect. I'd faced down betrayal after betrayal. But in that cold, empty warehouse, standing on my own, I realized I'd found something priceless. Something I hadn't even known I was searching for. Peace. A quiet, steady peace that came not from revenge, but from finally truly being in control of my own destiny. Looking back, revenge isn't about shouting your victory from the rooftops. It's not about the dramatic takedown, though sometimes that's a necessary step. True revenge, the kind that lasts, is about standing tall when they expect you to crumble. It's about rebuilding your life, brick by careful brick, on your own terms, while they fade into the background noise of your past. Betrayal, especially from family, from those you trusted most, it cuts deeper than any knife. But sometimes those deep cuts carve out the path to who you were truly meant to be. I lost my sister. I lost the illusion of the family and friendships I thought I had. But I found a strength I didn't know I possessed. I found clarity. And eventually I found peace. And that, honestly, is worth everything. If you've ever had to rise from the ashes of a betrayal, if you've ever had to fight for your own quiet redemption, I'd love to hear your story. Please share it in the comments below. I truly do read every single one. These stories, they connect us. They remind us we're not alone. And if this story resonated with you, if you found a piece of your own journey in mine, please consider subscribing to TK Revenge Story. We share stories of strength, resilience, and the quiet triumphs that come after the storm. And hey, if you're feeling generous, the super thanks button is right there. Sometimes giving back, even in small ways, is part of the healing process too. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you spending this time with me. See you next time.